morning, good evening, good day. Welcome to my session, which I'm going to be presenting on how to use PowerShell to get data from any Power BI REST API. I hope you're going to find this useful. It is a little bit technical, but I also started out just learning the basics, and you just build on those foundations as you go along. So welcome to my session. Okay, special thanks to Microsoft for supporting the Data Platform Geeks and SQL Server Geeks community initiatives. It's really great that they're able to help and support us with this. Quickly, a little bit about myself. I enable organizations to use their data for a competitive advantage using the Microsoft Power BI and Azure technologies. I'm Microsoft MVP. I'm also a co-organizer of the Queensland Power BI user group, and I'm currently working for Full Move, which is my consulting company based in Brisbane, Australia. Okay, so an overview of what we're going to be going over today. So first, just some general things around why should I use PowerShell for Power BI data. Then what is PowerShell, how to install the Power BI modules, how to update the modules because they update over time. Then I'll go into how to use some basics of PowerShell just to get you going. Hopefully it all makes sense. Then a simple REST API to use using PowerShell. Then going on to exporting data to a CSV, again using PowerShell, Power BI REST API. And then toward the end, I'll just show a more advanced REST API query with PowerShell with a whole lot of variables and scripts going in. And I guess I'll put there questions, but you can ask questions during the presentation because this is pre-recorded. So while the recording is happening, please feel free, more than welcome to ask questions, and I will answer them going through as well as afterwards. So why should I use PowerShell for Power BI data? So, when I started off, there weren't many REST APIs, and then as time's gone on, they typically, the way I almost imagine it is for Power BI, you have to automate a lot of code and have a lot of things running. So they're using APIs and REST APIs to manage a lot of the things programmatically behind the scenes. So a lot of information that is available is not through the Power BI service, but is available through the Power BI REST APIs. And I personally found using PowerShell to do this and to get data out and to automate certain things has been a real lifesaver, because when you're using PowerShell, it's a scripting language. Yes, I know it's another scripting language, but what that means is you can then automate things and let it do things for you, which is awesome. I'm all for automation and not having to do something manually 100 times. So using PowerShell for Power BI data, you can do things like exporting the audit logs. So another example is exporting the PBIX files where applicable, so that you've got a copy of those PBIX files. You could monitor refreshes, so you can download all the data around your refreshes. What are they successful? Are they unsuccessful? How long are they taking? And a lot of, well, when I've said anything, there's a lot of Power BI service details where you can either extract information out, or you can also create certain things. Most of the time, I am extracting data out or initiating refreshes. There's a lot of powerful information that you can actually do using Power BI desktop. Sorry, not Power BI desktop, the REST APIs. Apologies for that. And yeah, it makes it a lot easier and a lot better to use. So in the next section, we are going to cover what is PowerShell, and I actually will go through this on a virtual machine that I've got set up with this all running. So I'll go through exactly the screen parts and what that is. We're a bit more interactive instead of just an actual screenshot. Then going on from there, where can PowerShell be used? So this is one of the great things where PowerShell can actually be used in not only, say, Microsoft products. It can be used in Azure. For example, you can use Azure Functions or Azure Runbooks to take the same code and run it in the cloud. You can run it on Windows, you can run it on Exchange, you can use it with SQL Server, as well as you can use it in AWS, the VMware Cloud, and Google Cloud. So there's actually quite a few places that you could, for example, port this code. You could develop it like I'm going to show you later, and then you can transfer it to these different places. So that's pretty cool in that it's not only you can only use it in one limited use case, you can actually use it in quite a few different places. So one of the things you've got to make sure when you want to use the APIs, if you've actually got to go into the tenant settings and make sure some of these tenant settings are enabled, depending on what you want to do. So some of the examples I'm going to show you today, you can just run straight off the bat, and other examples you need to have these enabled. So typically, if you are the Power BI admin, then you've got access to this. Otherwise, you'll need to chat to your Power BI admin and possibly your network admin to get these set up. So, for example, allow service principals to use the Power BI APIs. That's where you create a service principal. And the reason you have a service principal is that you can use this for automation, where it actually uses an ID and a key for all authentication, which means then you don't need to worry about passwords changing, that kind of stuff. So it makes it really handy for a lot of those automation tasks. Then under the admin API settings, you also have to allow service principals to use the read-only admin API. So there's a whole lot of admin APIs, and when we talk about admin, is administrative tasks, which means, as an example, the admin API can overlook the whole tenant. So again, you want to allow a service principal to be able to read from this so that you can get a whole lot of information. Then the enhanced admin API responses with detailed metadata, again, is enhanced where they have a lot more information, really saying, and getting those down, as well as the next ones with DAX and MASA expressions. This is where you want to use DAX potentially. You want to extract some data out of the service. You can do that. As well as in the integration settings, if you are using Power BI Premium per user or Power BI Pro, you want to enable the dataset execute queries using the REST API. So what the dataset execute queries is essentially you can take a DAX query, which is going to return a result in a table, and you can use the REST API to query that and extract that out. So I do have a blog post with regards to that, and that makes it really handy and really powerful in terms of sometimes people just want data extracts, and now you can use that with the REST API. And using something like PowerShell, there's other ways to use REST APIs, but in my example, using the REST API, you can then extract that data out and do a whole lot of wonderful things with that. Okay, so let's get actually into showing you how this all works, etc. So what I have over here is a virtual machine, and I'm just going to go through and show you. I typically use the PowerShell ISE. You can also use Visual Studio Code. I just personally find a lot of Windows machines have got the PowerShell ISE installed. It's really there, and the best thing to do, I always recommend, is running it as administrator. So if I go more and I go run as administrator, this is now going to open up my PowerShell ISE. And now I'm just going to go through and just explain to you some of the components in here that we actually have. So what we have on the top here, like most Microsoft products, if we have the ribbon. So we've got a new script, so I'm going to click on that, and what that does is this is the part here where we can actually write the actual scripts that we're going to be using. You can open, save, cut, paste, copy. You've got undo, redo, you've got run, or run the selection, or stop if you actually want to stop it. And then what you have below is the output window. So this will give you the output of your script you've run, as well as you can also interact with PowerShell by typing over here as an example. Then on the right hand side, we've got all the commands that we have, which will give you some things, and you can also search for something in particular if you're looking for a particular model name. Now, one of the things I just want to highlight is I don't personally think I'm an expert in PowerShell. I'm more like a self-taught person who almost just takes a piece of code, hacks it together. There's loads of examples on the internet for different things in PowerShell. There's loads of people who've got code snippets in that which you can copy and paste and break apart and put together. And I'll show you some of those little tips and tricks today in terms of how to learn and go through that. I've also been using PowerShell for a long time, for quite a couple of years, and I've found it to be rock solid, reliable. It just runs day in and day out in automation tasks. And because there's so much content out there, you can always do anything with the scripting language. Sometimes you got to figure it out. It might not be straightforward, but it's almost like the example of using Power Query, where you can shape the data. It might take a few steps and you've got to go backwards and forwards a few times, but in Power Query you can always get the data into the shape that you want. For me personally, using PowerShell, I find I can script the data the way I want. Again, a little bit of backwards and forwards learning, hitting your head, that type of thing. And obviously, as mentioned, this can actually be used through multiple different areas. Okay, so now we're going to actually move on to going through PowerShell and getting started with the basics. Okay, so now that we have PowerShell installed, one of the things, the most important thing to do, I typically find when using these kind of things is, always put in some comments, a bit of code in your code, so if someone else comes and has a look, they know what's been done. Or if you come back to something that you haven't touched for a year or 2 or 3, you can always find that out. So one of the most important things is using the hash, where you can put in some code. So this is my code, and what you'll see is when it's a comment, it'll actually be in green. So it does have, the other thing I forgot to mention is in PowerShell, as you'll see now, it does have IntelliSense, which is awesome. Sometimes you got to know what you're typing for, same like if you're using DAX and IntelliSense, but it's great to have it because it actually allows you to be able to pick those things up. So what I'm going to start with now with using PowerShell is let's just do something and say let's get the date. So what I'm going to put down my code is get in the current date, and for that the code is, as you can see now, as I start typing get dash, it brings up the IntelliSense, and as you can see there's a long list in here, but I know obviously I've prepped for this, is get date. So now what I can do to test this out is I can actually come up here, you'll see it's highlighted, it says run the script. So if I go through and run the script, what it's done is it's shown me the code that it's running over here, and then you can see now it's actually gone through and it's given me the date when I'm recording this here in Australia, which is awesome. So I'm like, oh, that's great, I can actually see that. So the next thing is what you want to do a lot of the times is you want to store something as a variable so you can use it again and again without having to get that same piece of code. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to just say store the date in a variable, and to store the variable, it always has to start with a dollar. And what you'll see, these are some of the inbuilt variables. So what I'm going to store, you can give it any name, can't have any spaces when using PowerShell for names and that. So I'm just going to give it the variable of my date, which is now the name that I want, and I'm just going to say equals, which is what is going to be stored in there, and I'm going to put in get date. Okay, so now the final step is when using variables, a lot of the time, you want to, what is a variable returning? You want to see what that is, because quite often what will happen is there might be an error, something might not be working. So how do you output that variable when using PowerShell? So I'm just going to say, yeah, show the contents of the variable. And all you got to do is you actually just got to go again and just say what the variable name is. So now I've got the original get date, I've got the one I've stored. So as in this example, I'm just going to highlight that code because sometimes you just want to run a code snippet. You don't want to run the whole thing. And up here now, I'm going to say run the selection. And what you'll see now is it's giving me the code. And effectively, yes, I do have the same result, but it's because I have put this in over here saying, you've shown me the variable name that it comes out with. So that's a brief introduction into just some of the basics of PowerShell in terms of how it works, getting the modules and that. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to go into PowerShell specific things. So for Power BI, sorry. So the nice thing is they also have released Power BI commandlets. Commandlets are pieces of code in PowerShell that they actually have run. So I'm going to go through to show you that, and we're going to install that because it will actually just show you how to get that all going. Okay, so now just to show you as a reference, what we have over here is the Microsoft Power BI commandlets for Windows and PowerShell Core. And what you'll see over here, these are all the different PowerShell modules. It gives you some details which I'll go through now, how to install it. And what you can see over here is these are the latest versions. As of recording today, the version is 1.2.1093. So what we need to do is we now want to install this because we can then use these specific commandlets. So in order to do that, what we need to do is if I go back to PowerShell, what I'm going to now do is actually let's just save this script here. And let's just call this one simple PowerShell. So then, okay. So now I'm going to create another one, a new script. And now what I'm going to do is because I want to install the module. Some things are quite intuitive in PowerShell. Other things might not be. I'm just going to go on and say install module, and then what happens is when you're using IntelliSense, there's often options that you can use in that. So if I press dash, you'll see it'll give me the options related to the install module PowerShell. So name, so that's the actual name of the module I want to install. And if I come back to the side over here, you can now actually see it's given it to me. I don't have to type it out. I can just copy that actually. So it's Power BI management. And what that module will do, it will install all the dependencies below that. So what I'm actually going to do, let's just go here, paste that in, and now I'm going to click on run the script. So when I run the script, it's going to download and install that. So what you can see here now on the bottom is I've got an option where it's busy installing that. And what is happening, because this is a new machine, I need to first get the latest version of NuGet. So I'm going to say yes. You can see that's already completed. Hopefully that won't take too long, but this is good in terms of how it will actually be for your experience the first time you use it. Now it says, am I sure I want to install PowerShell from an untrusted repository? So what that means is obviously you can download scripts and install things that could do malicious things on your computer. So it always asks you the question to make sure. So I'm just going to go yes to all. And now what it should be doing is installing. I'm not sure if installing the NuGet provider or the PowerShell scripts, but it's busy running. We can see over here it's actually downloading and installing, as well as on the bottom left here. It's quite important when you're running scripts that sometimes can take a long time. It says running script. So what it's now doing, it's busy downloading and installing those scripts for me. So that should hopefully not take too much longer to get that done. And you just have to wait for it to finish, and wait, that's successfully completed. And as you can see over here, it's got completed, which is awesome. So now what I can do is there might be some instances when it won't install because it's from untrusted source. So what you have to do is you've got to reset the execution policy on the machine. So depending on how you're running that. So if you get stuck with that, just remember there's a get execution policy to get that going. The other thing I wanted to just show you, if ever, the modules keep on updating, they add new commandments, there might be bug fixes, etc. So if you want to see what version you have installed, you can actually go get installed module, and then you go, what is the name? And I want to say it's my Microsoft Power BI Management. And if I run that, what you'll see here, it's given me the version, which is what we spoke of earlier, the 1.2.0.93. And at a later point in time, you might want to update that. There might be a bug fix or some new commanders. So what you can do there, it'll just be update module. And again, you say name, and you give it the name. And in this example, I can run it. I'm just going to run the script. And this should take pretty quick because it's going to compare and say, oh, you can almost see that it hasn't done anything on the screen below because I'm already on the latest version, which is great to see. So now that we've actually installed it, if I have to click on refresh over here, and now the reason I'm refreshing is because I've installed a new module, I want those modules to be available. So now if I start searching for Power BI, you can now see I have a whole lot of new Power BI commandments that have popped up, which is awesome. So that's showing that they are actually working, etc. Okay, so now we've got the Power BI modules installed. Now let's go and actually start finally, I guess, creating something where we're connecting to Power BI. So I'm going to create a new script again. And the first thing we need to do, as you'll know when using anything related to Power BI, is you have to log in. So when it logs in, it's going to actually give you an authentication token and those kind of things. So what I'm going to do over here is let's go logging into the Power BI service. And now what I can do is I can go connect. It does say Power BI service account, but we can just test this. So again, if I just click on run, what this is going to do, it's going to say, oh, you need to sign in. So let's sign in. And it's going to ask me for this. So let me just do this. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long. Maybe just go grab that code. And let me just see. Oh, there we go. It's come through on my other screen. So let's just pop that in there. Hopefully it shouldn't prompt me again for a while. It's got to always be safe with MFA. And now what you can see is below, I've successfully logged in. If you see over here, it's got my environment, my tenant ID, and who I'm logged in as. So that's the most important thing. The first thing, you've got to log in when using the Power BI service. So now that I've actually logged in, what we're now going to do is I want to go and see all the data sets from the My Workspace area. Again, this is just I'm starting off with something fairly simple that we can all do. We all have access to My Workspace. Getting that. So I'm just going to go getting Power BI data sets from My Workspace. And again, what I can do is if I go in here and I go search for data set, or let's just go Power BI. And if over here we can see here's Power BI get data set. So if I click on that, and I click show details, it'll then tell me what it's expecting. There's actually no default parameter that I need. I can pass things in, but I don't actually have to. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to go get Power BI dataset. So as you can see over here, I'm going to have to log in and then get the dataset. So now let's just run that. It's going to prompt me again, but this time hopefully I've signed in. Awesome. So now what you'll see is that run, and it's nice and quick. And what you'll see now, it's actually returned those data sets, and it's actually returned quite a lot of information. So one of the things we can actually do is, let's just go, for example, over here, we can see it gives me the ID, which is our GUIDs. It gives me the name, who it was configured by, the API enabled, URL, and a whole lot of other really important information. The storage mode ABF pretty much means that it's imported. And so that's actually pretty cool. But now that's great seeing it on the screen, but what happens if you want to export this? So one of the things we can use with PowerShell is actually then to take this that we see on the screen and export that into CSV, which might be easier to read or easier to use. So now what we can do, we can just build on this, and I can say exporting my data sets to CSV. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get Power BI dataset, and what it is, the little pipe delimiter is a way of taking that output and almost like storing it, and you're going to do something with that. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to say export CSV, nice little handy built-in another PowerShell commandlet. So what I'm effectively saying here is give me the results, store it, and now I'm saying next step, let's export it to a CSV file. So now what I can do is I can just go C:\\, and what you'll see, there's IntelliSense in here again. So I'll just go C, let's put it to the temp, and I want to give it a name. Let's say PBR datasets.csv. So again, I'm going to run the output, Excel outputting it to the screen. I want to output it to this actual file over here. So let's run that. Got to log in, and that's going to run. And now let's see, I have got, I can't spell, apologies for that. Let me just do this. I think that's better. Let's try it again. There we go. So now you'll see this output on the screen is because of this piece over here. And let's go see if I have to go to my Windows Explorer, C drive, temp, and there's the file over there. So let's just double click on it. Let's use Notepad. Say OK. And now what you'll see is it's now actually exported this into a CSV file. So the first one is just telling me the API that it's actually used, and now you can see it's actually exported into CSV file, which we expect the ID, the name configured by, and here we have all the particular details. So that's great. So now we could effectively take this export and import it into say Power BI desktop and report on these kind of things, which is great. So that's a nice easy way showing you how to use the Power BI, the REST API, and just logging in and getting those kind of details in. Okay, so now we're going to go and I'm going to show you a bit more a complex example in terms of getting some of the data out with a bit more variables and things that we have in the PowerShell and the Power BI module. That just makes it just to show you what we can do. And again, one of these important things that I want to talk about today is the Power BI activity events, because again, these activity events are only stored for 60 or 90 days. Either one, 60 or 90 days. But after that, if you don't store it, you lose it. So I always suggest for organizations starting out in Power BI, this is one of these things. You just need to get the data down and store it somewhere. And the great thing here is because you get these files out, I typically go and store them in Azure Blob Storage. They're stored in the cloud. They're safe. And then you've got your history for one day when they want to say, who's been using the reports, etc. So I'm just going to walk you through how I actually go through and get those things created. So let's just go first, and let's just go over here, and let's just go Power BI REST API activity events, and here it is over here. So what I wanted to show you first is the what it's actually asking for over here. So when you go through, so this is the actual API that you can call. The great thing is by using the Power BI modules that we've installed, we don't necessarily need to do this exact thing, but what we still need to pass through is what it still requires. If I go down over here, is it needs a start date and time over here and an end date and time over here. So these two things are critical in terms of actually getting that information through and exporting it out. So if we go back to our PowerShell, what we're going to have to do again, we always have to log in. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this piece here. Again, this is the joys of coding. You can just reuse useful snippets of code. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say getting the Power BI audit log. And now for this, I can just use get, and if I go Power BI active, not sure why it's coming up, probably because I need to restart PowerShell event. Hopefully I spelled that right. And now if it's right, yep. So now what I need is a start date and time. Okay, so what I'm going to do, let's just go to let's just go back to make sure there's a day I've got some activity in there. And what you'll now see, 1, 2, 3, just okay. And then end time is again going to be my end time. And it actually requires, as far as I remember, I'm just going to paste it in there, a specific, it's got to have the T in between. So now what I want to do is I'm going to run this and test it to make sure it actually brings me back something. So I've got to log in, as always. And now what I'm hoping to see over here, okay, so I've actually got an error. So the reason for that is I have got some of the syntax actually wrong in there. So let me just see here. So what I'm actually going to do over here is just go through and figure out why, and actually put some additional steps in to make sure we can get it to work. Okay, so what I'm now going to do is actually, do this in a way that will actually automate it, which means I can run it every single day. So what I want to actually do over here is I'm actually just going to say, I want to say how many days I want it to go back, because I want to sort of run it for the previous full day. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to say, how many days to go back, and then I'm going to put this into a variable we spoke of before, days to go back equal to 2. Okay, so I wanted to go back 2 days. Then the next thing I'm going to do is get the start date based on how far to go back, and I'm just going to copy out this piece of code, make sure it works, and So what you can see over here, I've given it the date, which is maybe the current date. And again, I'm using the get date. And I'm saying basically use the current date, add days, but I've put a minus, which means go back the 2 days. And I've actually specified an actual format that I wanted in there. So what I now can do is if I want to, I can just go $the date. And if I just run this little piece here, what I'm expecting to see is from 2 days ago. So the date in the format 2022-08-04. Okay. So now what I need to do is I need to get this in the particular format start date for what the REST API is expecting. So here I'm going to say get the start date format. And here once again, I'm going to just copy this code, which over here I've given it the variable of start date, and I'm using this date, and then I'm putting on the end over there. Okay, and then again, I need to get the end date, so let's go get the end date format. And again, this is almost the same, very similar, but now I'm saying get the variable of end date, and I'm putting this end on here. So now let's once again just test this. So if I go start date, $end date, let's just make sure that these are in the formats that I want. So let's just run that because I don't need to log in. And now I can see I've got the date, I've got the start date and the end date in the format that I actually require. Okay, so now what I like to do is I always like to create a variable for the file name so that I can just store this every day with the actual date. So to do that, let's just call this code as file name. And once again, cheat a little bit with the code. And I'm going to say my file name, and I'm pretty much using the same. I could actually just use the date over here. It looks identical, but I like to keep the variable name specific to what I'm trying to do with it. It makes it a lot easier going later on. So now again, one of the things I want to do is I want the export file path and name. So what I want to do over here is I like to personally store this as a variable. And one of the things you can see over here, which is I've added, is I've got the variable, but I've used my existing variable inside my file name. So you can actually pass these things through dynamically. So what this means is if I go here, and again, let's just say I want to see this as an output. So if I just do this little piece here, and I run that, you can see now it's actually going to put in the C temp, and it's going to use the date format, which is actually is different from this. There's no dashes. So I've got just the date.csv, which is awesome to see. Okay, so now we keep on building on this. So now I actually want to get these activity events. So let's just say get activity events. And again, I'm going to post in the code here. And what I'm doing over here, I've now given a new variable called activity logs. So this is the variable that's going to store the actual activity logs. I'm using my command get the activity events. I'm saying start time, use the start date variable, the end time, the end date variable. And what I'm saying is part of that is converted from JSON, because this comes out as actual JSON. I don't want to store it as JSON. I want to store this out as a CSV file. So that's what this piece of code will actually do, is it's going to still store in that, but it's going to convert it from JSON for all of that data. So in order for me to store it as a CSV, I'm then going to select the details I want from the activity event. And again, piece of code. Paste this in here. And what I'm pretty much doing over here is I am creating a new variable called the activity log schema. I'm getting the output of the activity log so that the activity log is effectively stored in memory. And then I'm using this select object over here, which will then go through and it's basically I've hard coded select all these things from within the file. Okay, it'll make a lot more sense when it comes out in the end. And the last step I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take all of that and export it. So what I'm saying over here is that the data with the file and the columns I've selected, take that and export it to a CSV in the folder location that we said, which is what I've, we've exported in the past. So we can see this over here. So what I'm now actually going to do is I'm going to run this. So it's going to go through all these steps. Let's actually just do this. Let's just clear the screen so we can see. So I'm actually going to run that. So now what it's going to do is I have to log in. And what we'll see happening over here, the variables we outputted before, which we're checking, are still running. So it's run. So I should now see in my temp folder, I should see the CSV file. So if I go in here, hey, happy days, there it is over there. Let's open it up. And as you can see over here, there's a whole wealth of information in here from the activity logs. I don't have a lot personally, and this is my tenant, but a lot of organizations, this will be a massive file. And as you can see over here, it's all comma separated. I have all the data, like over here, an example, I can see there's a view report, get workspaces, run email subscriptions, etc. So you have all this information now. And the great thing is you've got the activity event stored. If this is an Azure Blob storage or stored somewhere where you want to make sure you can keep it for a long period, it's all working. And then you could use Power BI, connect the CSV file, and create some awesome Power BI reports on top of that. So one of the things I wanted to quickly go through is actually using the Power BI REST API, where it's not actually part of the Power BI command. So you've actually got to pass through the URL with regards to that. So what I'm going to do over here is, let me just check my notes quickly. I'm going to get the users from a data set. So let's just go over here. Let's just see. So if I go over here, I want to get, so if here's the REST APIs where I'm at. So I go data sets. If I go get data set users and group, I'll click on that. What you'll see over here, I've got to use the get, my location. I've got to find the group ID, and I've got to find the data ID, data set ID, apologies, and then users, which will then give me the list of users. So first things first, what I'm going to do, just a bit wary of time, I'm actually going to just grab the code over here. And let's just go back to PowerShell, and then I'll step through how I go through this. So what you can see over here, I need to log in. I need to get my group ID, my dataset ID, where I want to export it to. So on this machine, different one I've been testing on, I'm going to export it over there. This time I'm actually just going to export it as a JSON file, because Power BI can also read JSON files. And then as you can see over here, this is the URL. If you have a look there, it's PowerShell /groups, the group ID, datasets, dataset ID, users. So if you see over here, that's that same syntax that's over there. But now what I need to do, let's just log in here. Let's log into the Power BI service. Sign in, no thanks. Use another account. Let's go to that one, sign in. Don't know if I should have said, let's just I don't have my phone right on me. So let's just do that. I'll just get the text. Be a little bit easier. A little bit quicker. It takes a little while to come through. There we go. Paste in the code. Just so I can log in. So the reason I'm logging into the Power BI services is I need to get those actual group GUID and data set GUID. So as you can see over here now, that is, I've logged in. Let me just see over here. I've actually got to recall which group I can actually use. Give me 1 second. I just need to remember which actual group so I can actually show you the details. Okay, so let's go find the actual group. So what I need is I actually want to look in this Power BI dynamic row level security. So what you'll see over here is I am part of that group, but I now actually need to go in and find the dataset ID. So to find the dataset ID, the easiest way to do that is click on settings, settings again, and then when you click on datasets, what you'll see is if you see over here, it doesn't have anything in the URL, but if I actually click on one, it will then give me that dataset ID. So let's just find the one I'm after. Is this one here? Okay. So what you'll see now is what I actually need is to get the group ID. So the portion directly after group is the group ID. So if I go over here and I'll take this piece between the 2 forward slashes over there, that's my actual group ID. So if I go back to PowerShell, I'll go over here. I can delete that out to make sure, paste that in. Then because I've clicked on my data set, I can actually come over here. And let's just go there, click on that. That's my dataset ID that I'm looking for. And let's just paste that in there. So that's over there. So now what you'll see is if I want to, let's just test this, see if it works. So if I highlight all of that, I've got my dataset variable, which I want to see where am I going to export it to. And the URL that it's going to pass. So let's just go over there and let's run that. I have to log in, as always. So let's just sign in. And what you'll see over here, I've got the dataset, the group, and this is the URL. So, you know, if you want to double check, does that look right? Is it the right format? Because very often it won't work. It's like, but am I giving it the right URL, which we are expecting? And then the final thing is I'm going to use the invoke Power BI REST method. So what that means is that actually is just going to go and call that. So what you need there as part of requirements is the URL, which I've outputted here, and the method, because you can method get means you're going to get something from the Power BI service. A post, you want to put something in there, like you want to post something up, and then the output file. So what do you want to do? So I'm getting something. Do you want to output that file somewhere? That's where you'll see I have used the variable here in my temp location again and put that in there. So now if I actually run that, let's see if we'll export, and then we could see which users are part of that data set. So that's exported. We can see that's in there. Let's go back to our temp file. Here we've got a JSON file this time. So try use an app. Let's use Notepad. And now what you'll see is this looks a little bit different because obviously it's JSON and not CSV, which in theory you could format. But what you can see over here on the data set, I have got a group in there. And then over here you can see I've got a principal type of user, pro, I've got myself in there, and I've got Sean in there as user. So these are the dataset users that that have got permission. So if you see over here, we've got read, share, and explore, read, write, share, and read. So what that means, if I have to go back over here, and let's go to my datasets, I think it was this one, and I'll go to manage permissions. Here we can see, here's the same 4 users. I've got the email address, the group, and I've got their permissions over here. So I'm an admin, etc. So if you go over here, you can see those different options which just come through. So that's a bit more advanced PowerShell script, but as you can see, there's a wealth of information that you can do on here. And if I just go back here, you can see how many REST APIs there are. Under each one of these, there's a whole lot of different admin tasks, and they keep on adding to this, etc. So it's really a wealth of information with regards to that. So if I just go back to my presentation, live demos, we're done with that. As mentioned, if there's any questions, please put them through on the chat. Be more than happy to answer them. And finally, a special thanks again to Microsoft for supporting the event, as well as the awesome people at the SQL Server Data Geeks, Data Platform Summit, Data Platform Geeks for putting this all together. It takes a lot of work, and I really appreciate that. And finally, a big thank you. 3 ways to win prizes. Post your selfie with the hashtag DPS 2022, and please give session feedback. Always great to know what's good, what was not good. Visit the sponsors and exhibitors and follow them on Twitter, the Data Geeks and the Data Summit. So thanks for the session. I hope you found it useful, and thank you.